Ever wondered how your OTT platforms like Netflix, Amazon, or Hotstar is able to grant session on your smart TV just by entering some random code on your phone or maybe on website? Welcome to Salesforce with Vinayaka. Today we are talking about device enablement flow, and this is the fourth part series of external client app that we are going to discuss. Let let's talk about one of the demo here that I have prepared, and then we can talk about the nitty-gritties that are happening in the backend. Consider that Salesforce is hosted in a remote server where you don't have a provision or keyboard access where you can enter credentials in order to authenticate Salesforce session on that server. Now, this is where typical device enablement flow comes in, right? Because as we just spoke about OTT platforms, in on TV, you can actually enter your credentials by remote, but that would be too much to ask for. Hence, they have actually given you a provision where you can enter the code that is displayed on TV on your smart device, and then it gets activated where you can enjoy your shows. Similarly, Salesforce, in order to authorize the session on server, you can activate something called device enablement flow, and then using that code, you can actually authorize your session. Let me talk about my demo here where I have this particular local host, which is consider this particular one, it is hosted in some random server where I don't have access to enter credentials. And that is why device enablement flow comes into picture. Now, I am just running one small Node.js server here in order to facilitate this demo. You can see right now it is saying get user code and verification URL. As soon as I click on this particular get user code and verification URL, in the backend, the device or the server is trying to hit Salesforce using the client ID that we have created for external client app. That client ID is being used to request Salesforce, hey, can you please authorize this session? And this is the user code that user will be entering. Now, consider this particular user code I have copied, and let's say I opened in a different this device altogether where I have access to my keyboard and mouse where I can enter this particular user code and then I click on continue. Now, you can observe that here it is waiting for user authorization. That means it is waiting for me to authorize. As soon as I authorize, it will be trying to fetch the access token, and in turn, it is trying to get the records. In my case, I have just simply pulling the limits that are there in Salesforce system of the Salesforce org that I have been connected to. So as soon as I click on allow, here because of our polling that is there using our Node.js, it is trying to do the check for every 5 seconds whether this particular user code is being authorized by Salesforce or not. As soon as this polling is done, you can see the access token has been generated, and using that, I was able to fetch this particular limit. Now, I can show this in a better UI readable format where user can actually read this and understand. Or probably I can just simply ask user to do some action about record, and that particular updates or DML will go and sit back in Salesforce in the backend. Or I can just simply show some record details, maybe account or maybe case records, and then I can just display that in this particular UI in a very readable format. This is all good. We understood how the device flow is actually working in the working in the UI, but we need to know the nitty-gritty in the backend. That is where the interesting part starts, right? So now I'm just going to switch over my VS Code where I'm talking about this HTML page, and this is the server JS, that is the Node.js that is trying to run. You can see this particular HTML. This is the exact button that I just clicked on, and as soon as I click on this particular button, it is trying to make one API callout called begin device enable. If I go to this particular begin device enable request here, it is trying to make a post request with the device code that it will have. I mean, the response type is device code, which will return the device code along with user code. I did not show the device code because that is not needed in the UI. That is just to device that needs to be verified. Hence, it is of no use. But user code is something that we need to use because that is the same exact code that user needs to enter in that verification URL. Now, as soon as they enter this particular one, you can see that I am trying to do a polling here. You can see to get that particular verification is there or not, right? And then once that is done, I am going to do the access token part where I'm doing this particular API request, where I will show in a minute in the Postman exactly how all these requests are actually placed in the Postman export format. Now, coming to once we get this particular access token, then I'm just going to display that access token here. You can see authorization successful in access token. That is the same thing that is here. And then it is in console log. That's why it is not coming, but you can see this result. I'm just printing here. I'm just printing here, and then I'm getting this particular access token. Using this access token, you can see this is the same access token. I'm sending this to fetch records, where I'm going to fetch this particular record with the limits. So I'm using limits, but here, as I said, like we can do way more than that. Once we have access token, everything falls in the picture. Now, if I talk about the postman here, you can see here this is the device enablement flow, and I'm this is the URL that I have, and all these details is in my LinkedIn post, where you can use that as a reference and try to create your own postman request. Now, using this particular URL, I am going to make the response type as device code, and this is the client ID, that external client tab that we have created, which I will show it in a minute. Now, this particular client ID, using that, if I click on send, then I'm getting this user code, and this is the verification URL that I need to go and enter that, right? So let me just go ahead and copy this particular URI and come here and paste it, and then copy this user code and paste it here and connect. You can see this device code. As I said, like this is needed in order to do backend verification from device to device. That's why I did not show, but I showed this and this in our HTML. Now here I click on allow. Since we are not doing any polling here, it would not automatically show that this particular device code is actually ready to use. Right now, what I can do is I can do another API call out to get access token. So the URL pretty much remains the same. The grant type is device because I'm going to enter the device code here, and the client ID is nothing but the external client app's client ID. As soon as I click on send, you can see that I can get the access token here, that which I can use further to fetch, or maybe I can do some operations on my records in the Salesforce. Now, as soon as I click on send, I am able to get this particular JSON formatted limits in my system. Coming back to Salesforce, here you can see that if you have followed my series, I've already spoke about external client app, how we can create, and that's why I'm covering this in at the very end. And then the only change that I have made is in the OAuth, I have enabled device flow here, and I have given some required OAuth scope here so that the fetch and the pull request can be done. And this is the pretty much same settings that we have done for the remaining of the series, that if you are following, if not, I would highly suggest you to watch those series. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this pretty much gave idea at a high level how exactly device enablement flow on external client app works. Stay tuned for the further JWT and the enablement token exchange flow that we are going to cover in this part in this series. Thank you so much.